Australia is a place that feels impossibly old. It has a sort of ancient, sun-baked stillness to it that you just don't find anywhere else on the planet. For an awfully long time, it was a world unto itself, a vast, isolated continent doing its own thing. Before anyone with a powdered wig and a funny-looking hat ever laid eyes on its shores, people were already here. The first Australians, the Aboriginal peoples, arrived an astonishingly long time ago. We're talking at least 65,000 years. That's a number so large it practically falls off the page. It makes the pyramids of Egypt look like they were built last Tuesday. These were the first true adventurers, crossing seas on what must have been the most rudimentary of watercraft to reach this enormous and frankly rather intimidating landmass. Imagine arriving in a place where everything is new, the trees are strange, the animals are positively bizarre, kangaroos hopping about, koalas looking perpetually dazed. The Aboriginal peoples didn't just survive here, they thrived. They spread out across the entire continent, from the lush, humid rainforests of the north to the bone-dry deserts of the center. They developed a profoundly deep connection to the land, an intricate spiritual worldview known as the Dreamtime. This wasn't just a collection of stories, it was a map, a moral compass, and a history book all rolled into one. For tens of thousands of years, this was the story of Australia. It was a continent of hundreds of distinct nations, each with its own language, laws, and customs, all living within this ancient, spiritually charged landscape. Britain in the late 18th century had a problem. Its prisons were overflowing. This was due to a number of factors, including a fondness for ridiculously harsh laws and the unfortunate loss of its American colonies. So, the British government, in a moment of what can only be described as desperate inspiration, looked at Captain Cook's maps. They saw a massive, empty-looking land on the other side of the planet and thought, perfect. It was a truly audacious idea, sending a fleet of ships filled with convicts and their guards on an 8-month voyage to a place they knew almost nothing about. It was the equivalent of deciding to colonize the moon with a group of people arrested for stealing bread. So, in 1788, the first fleet arrived. 11 ships crammed with over 1,000 people, about 750 of whom were convicts, sailed into what is now Sydney Harbour. The early years were brutal. They were unprepared for the strange climate, the unfamiliar soil, and the sheer, overwhelming isolation. Starvation was a constant threat, and everything from farming to building was a struggle. Of course, the land wasn't empty. The arrival of all these new people was a disaster for the local Aboriginal population, the Eora people. The British brought with them diseases like smallpox, to which the indigenous people had no immunity, and the results were devastating. For the first few decades, Australia was mostly known for two things: sheep and convicts. The wool industry boomed, and vast fortunes were made by pastoralists who laid claim to enormous tracts of land. But then, in 1851, something happened that changed everything. A man named Edward Hargreaves, who had been to the Californian goldfields, found gold near Bathurst in New South Wales. The news spread like wildfire, and the world came rushing in. The great Australian gold rush was on. People from all over the globe, ambitious Englishmen, hardy Irishmen, determined Chinese miners, and adventurous Americans, dropped everything and boarded ships bound for Australia. The population exploded. Tent cities with names like Ballarat and Bendigo sprang up overnight in the goldfields. These were chaotic, muddy, and often lawless places, teeming with hope and desperation. All this newfound wealth had to go somewhere, and much of it was poured into building cities. Melbourne in particular became a boomtown. Fueled by the riches dug from the Victorian goldfields, it transformed from a small town into one of the grandest cities of the British Empire. The gold rush also had a profound political impact. Tensions in the goldfields famously boiled over at the Eureka Stockade in 1854. Although the rebellion was swiftly crushed, it is often seen as a pivotal moment, the birth of Australian democracy. After years of debates, conventions, and a surprising amount of paperwork, the colonies agreed to unite. On the first day of the new century, January 1st, 1901, the Commonwealth of Australia was born. This new nation's loyalty to the empire was soon put to the test. The campaign they are most remembered for is the disastrous one at Gallipoli in Turkey. Though a military defeat, Gallipoli became a cornerstone of Australian identity. The post-war years brought profound change. The old idea of a white Australia was gradually dismantled, and the country opened its doors to immigrants from all over the world. This wave of migration transformed Australia from a predominantly Anglo-Celtic society into one of the most multicultural nations on Earth. You can see it and taste it in any Australian city today. The food, the festivals, the languages spoken on the street. It's a vibrant, dynamic mix of cultures living together under that famously big sky. And so we arrive at today, August 7th, 2025. Modern Australia is a complex and fascinating place. It's a prosperous, peaceful, and highly urbanized country, yet it retains a deep connection to its vast and wild outdoors. It is, in the end, a land of contrasts, ancient and modern, urban and wild, a sunburned country with a history as epic and sprawling as the continent itself. It's a place that, once you get to know it, is impossible not to be completely captivated by.